Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I have a device I talked a little bit about in a recent review. This is something you can add into your system to add a tube flavor of sound. I've had it here for several weeks. I've been testing it in different configurations, and it has actually blown my mind as to how well this works. This is the ModWright Analog Bridge, and it's sort of an accessory that you add to your system to inject the flavor of tubes. Now on the front there's a switch here that you can choose between two types of tube flavors. This has 5 tubes. You have a GZ34 rectifier, you have two 6922 tubes, and two 6SN7 tubes. So when this arrived to me a couple of months ago, I put it in the system immediately. And I remember the first time I tried it, I placed it between the HiFi Rose RD160 DAC and the T+A PA3100 HV integrated amplifier that I reviewed recently. Before I put this in the chain between those two pieces, the sound was lovely. It was actually really, really good. That amp is killer. The DAC is killer, but there was a little bit of, say, flatness when comparing it against the better DACs I've heard, specifically DACs that had tubes in them. I was also running at the time a Nagra Tube DAC and a Nagra HD DAC X, both with tubes. And I was curious if adding this between that HiFi Rose RD160 and the amplifier would bring it closer to that tube DAC kind of sound. Well, putting it in, I placed it between the two, I turned it on, and lo and behold, it did do what it is advertised to do. It didn't introduce anything into the system in a negative way. There was no noise, there was no hum, there was no buzzing, there was no interference, there was none of that. It was invisible, like it wasn't even there. But what it did do was add some fullness, some three-dimensionality, some of that little bit of tube glow, a little bit of tube airiness, depending on the tube complement I chose. With the 6SN7 tubes back here, which is actually one of my favorite tubes for tubed preamps, the sound was a bit warmer, a little bit darker than it was without, a little bit more plump and juicy, and it just had that familiar character that made me start getting into the music. And instead of thinking and criticizing, saying, this is a little flatter than what I heard last week or whatever, you know, critiquing the system, I was just enjoying the music. And when that happens, you know you're onto something good. So when I switched over to the 6922s with this switch like so, it brought a sharper, more detailed, more airy performance. That darkness, that little bit of shade of darkness and warmth was gone. And in its place was more excitement. It was more alive, yet there was still something changed about the sound. It was no longer as flat sounding. It was more three-dimensional and beautiful. And in that setup, that was the setting I preferred the most, with these little teeny tubes here. And I was like, wow, this device here made that RD160 DAC get 80-85% of a DAC with tubes in it. That was pretty remarkable. Now, it did not match the Nagra DACs in overall performance, but this thing was able to get that lower cost DAC closer. So what I did next is I placed it in the system between my Nagra HD Pre and the Nagra Classic amp. Now, the HD Pre has tubes in it and the Classic amp does not. And the sound is beautiful as is. I have no complaints, but I was curious. So I plopped this in between those two using XLR connections, because this one has the RCA or XLR connectors. The XLR connection is an option you can add on at the time of order. So I had that in place and it did change the sound. It added a little more body. The Nagra sound, especially the HD line, is highly resolving. It has a little bit of warmth, that has some body to it, and really, really tight controlled bass. But adding this into that, say with the 6SN7s, again, added a little more warmth, added a little more body and juiciness. Now, when I switched to the smaller tubes again, the same effect happened. I was still hearing the full character of the Nagra gear, but this was adding in a little bit more of that tube kind of sound, fullness, body, richness. That's what you can expect to get from this. Now, this was designed to go in an all solid state system. As we know, Solid state sounds different from tubes. At least they used to sound quite a bit different. Today's tube electronics, some of them are faster, more modern sounding than the old school tube designs. But say you have a solid state system that sounds a little lean, you're wishing for more body, more three-dimensionality, you're not getting that warmth, the plumpness, the emotional connection, it's not speaking to your heart, as I like to say at times. Adding this into a system like that will definitely add body, add beef, add pulp, add juice, add characters, the tube characteristic, and it does everything it is advertised as doing. It stays out of the way, it stays pretty much invisible. You can mute it, you can turn it on or off here, you can change the input here, and of course the tube type here. Now on the back, there are two switches. One is a bypass. If you flick it, it will bypass the analog bridge. Another one is to choose between XLR and RCA inputs if you chose the XLR option at time of checkout. So the output impedance is under 20 ohms, and that means this will work with any amp, any preamp. It's not going to bring issues to the system. Finally, ModWright Instruments is made right here in the United States. They are handcrafted here in the USA. They're a respectable company. They've been around a long time, and they offer some amazing products. This is just one of those things. It's like an accessory. And another cool thing is this is not something where in 2 years, 3 years, you'll see an Analog Bridge Mark II, or you shouldn't. Everything in here is going to be the same in 10 or 15 years, right? It's going to do the job exactly as advertised. This is not something I think that you'll see Mark I, Mark II, Mark III, Mark IV of, because it just is what it is. If you're looking for that extra bit of oomph in your solid state system, if you have a system that's lean or strident or anything like that, this could be the ticket to your satisfaction, to your eargasms, right? This is really cool. And if you like tubes, it's something that will look really cool as well. So that's it. That's my look at the ModWright Analog Bridge. I also have a written review over at my website. I will link to that in the video description below. I'll also link to ModWright's website where you can find out more information about this. As always, I was not paid a penny to do this review. This is going back to ModWright here tomorrow, and it was a pleasure to check it out. I want to thank ModWright Instruments for letting me do this and letting me share my thoughts with all of you guys. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. I have some cool speakers. In fact, March is going to be a speaker month. I have some really awesome speakers here, 4 or 5 sets that I've been swapping in and out nonstop, listening to them nonstop. So March, be sure to check this out. I'm going to have some really cool speakers that I will be featuring here. So be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and check back. I'll see you then.